Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be soft spoken horror story. I'm not feeling too well. I have a bit of a sore throat and I think whispering makes it, I know it's kind of difficult to whisper, so I'm going to do a soft spoken video instead. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Warren cases. So as promised, today I have 5 of their cases. So I'm going to do it a little bit different than the previous video, because in the previous video I didn't really mention what parts of the cases were confirmed facts or what was disputed and which parts are from the movie adaptation. So I didn't like how the video turned out, so I thought I should have done that. So I actually did the research again for these 5 stories, so hopefully it's correct, because there's a lot of information, a lot of variations of what is the truth and what came what's part of what was exaggerated for the movie, or so today's 5 cases, I don't think I think maybe 3 of them were made into movies. I'm not entirely sure. So I hope my research is correct and I might be able to tell you which parts of the story is it's real, or confirmed facts, or what's been disputed. Okay, let's get started first, okay? So the first case for today we have is the Southend Werewolf Case. This is the true story of Bill Ramsey. So this is actually one of the more stranger paranormal cases. It comes straight from England in the 1980s, and what makes it so bizarre is that it involves alleged werewolf possession. Yeah, not ghosts, not demons, but a man who believed he was transforming into a werewolf. So this case was investigated by Ed Lorraine Warren. So let's get into it. So who was Bill Ramsey? Bill Ramsey was born in Southend-on-Sea, England, and by all accounts he had a pretty normal childhood. But then, when he was 9 years old, something happened that he never forgot. He was playing outside one day when all of a sudden he was overcome by an intense, bone-chilling cold, and not just a regular shiver. He described it as feeling like ice was running through his veins. Then came the rage. This wasn't just a temper tantrum or a kid throwing a fit. This was something even deeper, even darker. So Bill said he felt an uncontrollable urge to bite and attack. And that's exactly what he did. His parents ran outside to check on him and found their 9-year-old son growling and gnawing on the wire fence in their yard, literally tearing at it with his teeth like an animal. His face was twisted in anger, his fingers curled into claw-like shapes, and when they tried to pull him away, he snarled and snapped at them, and then he just stopped. The cold feeling disappeared, and Bill was back to normal, confused, and exhausted. His parents assumed it was a strange childhood outburst, and they never spoke of it again. But for Bill, that memory always lingered. And then, decades later, it came back. So, by the 1980s, Bill Ramsey was in his mid-40s, married and working as a carpenter. His life was totally normal until the rage returned. The first serious incident happened in 1983 when Bill was out drinking at a pub with some friends. Everything was fine until, out of nowhere, he felt the same deep, icy cold that he had as a child. His body tensed, his breathing changed, and then he snapped. Before anyone could react, Bill lunged at one of his friends, throwing him across the room like he weighed nothing. Then he turned on another man and bit him, like actually sank his teeth into the guy's arm. Witnesses say Bill growled like an animal and had unnatural strength, and it took multiple people to hold him down. And just like before, the rage passed. Bill stumbled backward, shaking and confused, with no memory of what had just happened. And from then on, the episodes got worse. He would have horrific nightmares of himself running on all fours, hunting people like prey. He'd wake up with his jaw aching, like he'd been biting something in his sleep, and sometimes he would go into a trance-like state and not remember what he did for hours. And then in 1987, he had his worst episode yet. So one night, Bill was driving home alone when the cold sensation took over again. He pulled his car over, shaking violently, and at that moment, a police officer happened to walk up to check on him. And as soon as the officer got close, Bill lunged. The officer later described him as having the strength of multiple men. So Bill threw the officer to the ground, growled and bared his teeth, almost like he was about to tear into him. It took several officers to restrain him, and even after they got him in handcuffs, he continued growling, snarling and thrashing against the restraints. And then he suddenly stopped. Again, Bill had no memory of what had just happened. After this, doctors ran every test they could think of, and there were no drugs in his system, no history of mental illness, and no brain damage. So there was no medical explanation for why this was happening. So at this point, Bill was scared, and when he heard that Ed Lorraine Warren were in England, he agreed to let them investigate his case. So the Warrens believed that Bill wasn't suffering from a mental illness. They thought he was possessed by a demonic entity that took the form of a werewolf. They brought him to the US to meet Bishop Robert McKenna, a priest known for performing exorcisms. And during the ritual, witnesses claimed that Bill convulsed violently, his body twisting unnaturally, his face contorted, almost like it was changing shape, and he let out deep, guttural snarls as if something inside him was fighting to stay. And after several hours, the entity was cast out. And from that day on, Bill never had another episode. So some believe he was truly possessed, and others think he may have suffered from a rare psychological disorder like lycanthropy syndrome. This is a real condition where people believe they are turning into wolves, or maybe dissociative episodes where a person blacks out and behaves violently without memory of it, or even extreme rage disorder, which are uncontrollable fits of violence triggered by unknown factors. But no one knows for sure. But what's undeniable is that multiple people, including police officers and medical professionals, witness his episodes, and they all agreed that, paranormal or not, what happened to him was not normal. So, was it more psychological? Or could there be even something stranger going on? I couldn't really find what's true and what's not true for this story, so I'll leave it as it is. Okay, next story, the Smurl Haunting. So, like a lot of ghost stories, this one lasted for over a decade and included physical attacks, disturbing apparitions, and some believe that this was one of the most extreme cases of demonic oppression in modern history. So I'm going to break down, I found some information of what might have really happened, what's confirmed and what's maybe not so true. So let's get into it, okay? So Jack and Janet Smurl were an ordinary couple. They were devout Catholics, married young and had 4 daughters. In 1973, a hurricane severely damaged their home, so they decided to move into a new duplex at 328-330 Chase Street. It was perfect for them, as Jack's parents lived on one side, while Jack, Janet, and their kids lived on the other. Everything seemed fine at first, but within a few months, things started to change. So at first it was the small things, like cold spots in random parts of the house and unexplained noises such as footsteps and scratching inside the walls, and appliances breaking even though they were brand new, and also smells of rotting flesh that would suddenly appear and then vanish. And then slowly the whispers started, and at night Janet would hear soft voices coming from inside the house. The words were never clear, but they felt very angry, and she started feeling like she was being watched. And then came the shadows. Okay, so the first full body apparition appeared to Janet in 1977. She was doing laundry when she felt a presence behind her, and when she turned, she saw a black, featureless mass standing in the hallway. It had no face, no distinct features, just a humanoid shadow. And then it moved toward her. She screamed and ran upstairs, but when she turned back, it was gone. And after this incident, the activity escalated fast. The beds would shake violently at night, waking the whole family. Objects levitated or were thrown across the room. The TV would turn on and off by itself, and sometimes a dark figure would appear in the screen's reflection. And the house constantly smelled like sulfur, which in paranormal cases is often a sign of a demonic presence. But then in 1983, the entity started attacking. So Jack Smurl was the first to experience a direct assault. One night he was woken up by a heavy pressure on his chest. At first he thought it was sleep paralysis until he felt hands wrapping around his throat. Jack couldn't move and he couldn't breathe. Then he heard a low, guttural voice whisper in his ear, "I am going to kill you." And just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. When he woke up the next morning, he had deep, red scratches all down his back. Janet's experience was even worse. She claimed that on multiple occasions she was assaulted by the entity. She would be pinned down in bed, unable to move while ice-cold hands touched her. Jack eventually reported the same thing happening to him, and both of them felt violated, powerless and completely alone. By 1986, the Smurls had reached their breaking point. They reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, and when Lorraine walked into the house, she immediately said there were multiple entities present. One was a confused, harmless ghost, another was angry but not violent, but the last one was something inhuman. According to the Warrens, this demonic entity fed off negative energy. The more afraid the Smurls were, the stronger it became. They performed a minor blessing on the house, but things only got worse. The entity became more aggressive, taunting the Warrens, attacking the family more frequently. Objects levitated and smashed against walls. The entity began physically hitting and scratching the Smurls. Jack said that at night he would see a shadowy figure standing at the edge of his bed, staring at him. And the final straw came when the entity threw their dog against the wall. And that's when the Warrens arranged for an exorcism. They brought in multiple Catholic priests to perform a full exorcism. For hours they prayed over the house, commanding the entity to leave. At first, things seemed to calm down, but then within a few weeks the activity started again. By 1989, after 3 failed exorcisms, the Smurls finally moved out. And just like that, it stopped. The house went quiet, but the new tenants, they reported strange noises and shadows moving through the hallways of the house. So, I think until today this case remains one of the most debated hauntings. So here's what we know for sure. The Smurls genuinely believed they were being haunted, okay? Multiple priests attempted exorcism, and the Warrens documented this case in interviews and books, okay? But here's where it gets controversial, because skeptics believe the family suffered from sleep paralysis, stress, or mass hysteria. And a psychologist who interviewed the Smurls said it was likely a case of extreme stress and exhaustion. And the neighbors reported never hearing anything unusual coming from the house. And some believe that the Smurls embellished their story to sell their book, The Haunted. That being said, Jack and Janet stood by the story until their deaths, and they never took back their claims. So, what do you guys think? You think they were really haunted by a demonic entity, or could it be really a case of extreme psychological stress and sleep paralysis? I don't know. It seems a bit extreme for stress and sleep paralysis. I don't know. Did they make a movie out of this? I'm not too sure. I don't think. Is there? I mean, if there is, do let me know in the comments. I would love to watch it. Okay. Third case, the White Lady of Union Cemetery. So, this case case was heavily investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren, and Ed even claimed to have caught the ghost on camera, though the footage has never been released. And this is a location with over a century of reported hauntings, and what makes it terrifying is that the spirit doesn't just stay in the cemetery, she walks into the road, and people have reported hitting her with their cars only for her to vanish into thin air. So, let's get into the story, the real story. So, Union Cemetery is one of the oldest burial grounds in New England, dating back to the 1600s. So, this is at Eastern Connecticut. During the day, it looks like a peaceful historic cemetery, but locals have warned for decades, don't go there at night. For over 100 years, people have reported seeing a glowing figure, a woman in a white dress, wandering between the headstones. And she doesn't just appear in the cemetery, she has been seen walking onto Route 59 directly into oncoming traffic. People have claimed to hit her with their cars only to feel knocked back, and when they look back, she's gone. One police officer even filed a formal report after swerving to avoid a woman in white, only to realize she wasn't there. So who is she? And why does she keep appearing? So from my research, there are actually a few theories about the identity of the white lady. So theory number one is the murdered woman. One story says she was a woman who was murdered in the 1800s near the cemetery, and she had a child out of wedlock, which was a huge scandal at that time. The father of the baby was furious and allegedly killed her in a rage. Some believe she still wanders the graveyard, searching for a lost child. Theory number two, the woman in the wedding dress. So another version of the legend says she was a bride who died tragically on her wedding night. Some say she was killed in an accident, others say she was murdered before she could say I do. And the reason she wears a flowing white dress is because it's the same gown she was buried in. And theory number three is a warning. So this one is eerie because some believe that the white lady isn't just a ghost, she is a warning. Because when people see her, someone nearby dies shortly after. So she appears in the middle of the road, forcing drivers to swerve. And some who have seen her claim they or someone they knew died within days of the sighting. So which theory is true? That I don't know. So there were some encounters reported. So one of the most well-documented reports happened in the 1970s when a truck driver called the police after he thought he hit a woman near the cemetery. He felt the impact, he saw her body hit the windshield. He pulled over, panicked, but when he got out to check, there was nothing there. The road was completely empty, no body, no blood. He later described her as a pale woman with dark hair wearing a long white gown. Okay. Another encounter in 1993, a local firefighter was driving down Route 59 late at night when he saw a woman standing in the road. She was glowing white, and as he got closer, she turned to face him. Then as he slammed the brakes, she floated forward and passed straight through the hood of his car. When he looked back, she was gone. The next day, a woman was killed in a car accident near the cemetery. Is this a coincidence, or was the white lady trying to warn him? So, because of the sheer number of reports, Ed Lorraine Warren began investigating the cemetery in the 1990s. Okay, Ed believed the White Lady was a true spirit, and Lorraine claimed she could sense her presence immediately. They even spent several nights inside the cemetery using cameras, recording devices, and infrared equipment, and Ed claimed that one night he caught her on tape. He described her as a full-bodied apparition, glowing and transparent. However, he never released the footage to the public. The tape was allegedly stored in the Warren's archives, but to this day, no one has ever seen it. So some believe he was telling the truth, and others think maybe he made it up to the legend. So, is it really haunted? So here's what is true, okay? What we know is true, okay? The White Lady has been reported for over 100 years, long before even paranormal TV shows existed, and multiple police officers have officially filed reports about seeing or swearing to avoid her. Locals refused to drive near the cemetery at night out of fear of encountering her. But here's where the skepticism comes in, because there are no historical records of proving a murdered woman or tragic bride ever existed. And also, like I mentioned earlier, Ed Warren's footage was never shown publicly, so leads some of us to believe that maybe he fabricated it, right? And since we know that there are a lot of ghostly hitchhiker legends, exist worldwide, so some believe that the White Lady is just another urban myth. So, what is true? I don't know. But if you're driving past Union Cemetery at night and you see a woman in white, I would say don't stop, don't look back, and whatever you do, don't pick her up. So, I had goosebumps reading this story. Okay, fourth story, the Devil Made Me Do It case, the first US murder trial that used demonic possession as the defense. Okay, so I think it was Conjuring 3. If I'm not wrong, they even released a documentary on Netflix about this. I haven't got to watching it yet, but I'm very keen to watch it, okay? So, the story starts with an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. David was a regular kid until his family moved into a rental home in Brookfield. That's when everything changed. Shortly after moving in, David started complaining about a dark presence in his room. He told his parents he saw a shadowy man with glowing black eyes and animal-like features. The entity would whisper to him at night, telling him to hurt his family. He said the figure had hooves instead of feet. At first his parents thought it was just nightmares, but then the physical symptoms started. David began waking up covered in deep scratches and bruises. He would convulse and scream for hours, speaking in voices that weren't his own. His personality changed. He became violent, speaking in Latin and growling like an animal. His parents were terrified. They called priests, doctors, psychiatrists, but nothing helped. And that's when they reached out to Ed Lorraine Warren. So Lorraine claimed that she saw a black mist hovering around David. She and Ed concluded that David wasn't mentally ill. He was possessed. So over the next few months, Catholic priests performed multiple exorcisms on David, and witnesses claimed that during the rituals, David levitated off his bed, spoke in deep, guttural voices that weren't his, and predicted the future, including the murder that would happen months later. During one particularly violent exorcism, David suddenly stopped struggling. He turned toward Arne Johnson, his sister's boyfriend, and said, "He's coming for you next." And then Arne made a fatal mistake. Arne Johnson was 19 years old and had been dating Debbie Glatzel, David's older sister, for years. He was there for the exorcisms and he saw everything. But one night, during one of David's worst episodes, Arne lost control. He grabbed David and shouted, "Take me instead." Everyone in the room froze. According to Lorraine, a dark mist rose from David's body and entered Arne. And after that night, David's condition improved, but Arne's got worse. After the exorcism, Arne started acting strangely. He became aggressive and short-tempered. He would stare into space for hours, completely unresponsive. He claimed he saw a shadowy figure following him, and he would lose time, forgetting entire hours of his day. Then one day while driving, Arne suddenly pulled over, walked into the woods and disappeared for hours. When he came back, he had no memory of what had just happened. Debbie noticed that whenever he got angry, his voice would change, deeper and raspier. She started sleeping with the lights on. Then on February 16, 1981, things took a deadly turn. By early 1981, Arne and Debbie had moved in together. Debbie had taken a job working for Alan Bono, a 40-year-old kennel manager. Alan was friendly but had a drinking problem. On February 16, 1981, Arne, Debbie, and her younger cousins went out to lunch with Alan. Alan started drinking heavily, becoming louder and more aggressive. Then out of nowhere, Arne changed. His eyes glazed over, his face twisted with rage, and then without warning, Arne pulled out a knife. He stabbed Alan 22 times. Debbie later said Arne was not himself, that his body moved unnaturally as if he were being controlled. When the police arrived, Arne was still in a daze. He had no memory of what he had just done. He was arrested and charged with first-degree manslaughter, and his defense was that he was possessed. So his lawyer, Martin Minella, tried to use demonic possession as a legal defense. This is the first time in US history, and the Warrens testified, claiming Arne had been overtaken by a demonic entity. But the judge rejected the argument, stating that demonic possession couldn't be used as a defense in court. Without that, Arne's case fell apart. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. However, he only served 5. And when he got out, he never had another violent episode again. So, what's confirmed is, what's real about this case is David Glatzel did undergo multiple exorcisms documented by the Catholic Church. Arne Johnson did murder Alan Bono and claimed he had no memory of it. The Warrens investigated this and stood by their claims. But what's disputed is no one has ever proven Arne was possessed. Some believe he was mentally unstable or acting out of jealousy. David's brother Carl Glatzel later said the Warrens exploited their family for money, and the Catholic Church never fully endorsed their possession claim. So there's that. So do you think this is true, or did was he really possessed when he killed Alan, or is it something else? I'm very keen to watch the documentary that's on Netflix. Actually, I should have watched it before I did this video, right? Okay. Last case, the haunting in Connecticut, the real story of the Snedeker family. Okay. This case, let's get to it. Carmen and Elle Snedeker were a regular working class couple, and their 14-year-old son Philip had just been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he needed treatment at Yukon Hospital. The hospital was far from their home and money was tight. So when they found a cheap rental home in Southington close to the hospital, they jumped at the chance. But there was one detail the landlord didn't tell them. The house, it used to be a funeral home. So shortly after moving in, the Snedekers discovered something disturbing. The basement where their son Philip and his younger brother would be sleeping was still full of old funeral equipment, such as embalming tables, a large walk-in freezer where bodies had been stored, and toe tags and coffin handles stuffed into boxes. The kids were freaked out, but Carmen and Elle told them not to be scared. They thought it was just an old house, but that's when the activity started. Okay, things started getting weird. The lights flickered constantly even after the wiring was checked. The house had cold spots no matter how high they turned up the heat, and the air was often filled with the stench of rotting flesh, but it would vanish within minutes. That kept the whispers. Carmen would hear soft voices in empty rooms, and sometimes she would hear her name being spoken, but when she turned, no one was there. And then Philip's behavior later changed. At first, the family thought Philip was struggling with his illness, but his personality changed completely. He became violent and withdrawn. He stared into space for hours, whispering to himself, and he said, "A man talks to me at night." When asked what man, he refused to answer. Then Carmen found Philip's notebook, and inside were disturbing drawings of demons, corpses, and people being tortured. When she confronted him, he said nothing. Then one day, Philip attacked his cousin. He pinned her down, screaming that he had to kill her, and it took multiple people to pull him off. After that, Philip was hospitalized for schizophrenia, and his parents hoped that would end the nightmare, but with Philip gone, the activity got worse. The rest of the family became the targets. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed, silverware flew across the room, shadowy figures appeared in doorways, watching them at night, and the bed sheets were pulled up while they slept. So, the family knew that they had to get help, and that's when they called Ed Lorraine Warren. So when they arrived, when the Warrens arrived, they immediately declared that their house is infested with demons. And according to the Warrens, the reason for the haunting was what had happened in the house years before. And the theory is some of the funeral home workers had been necrophiles, meaning that they had sexually abused the corpses, and that level of evil had attracted something inhuman. Oh my goodness, I have goosebumps. And now that dark energy was attacking the Snedeker family, so the Warrens immediately arranged for an exorcism. And during the exorcism, witnesses said the wall shook violently, objects flew off shelves, and a black shadow was seen moving through the house. Then, after the exorcism, everything just stopped. And shortly after, they moved out. So, what's confirmed in this case is that the Snedeker family indeed lived in the house, and they had a son with cancer, and the house was a former funeral home. The Warrens did investigate the case and claimed it was a demonic infestation, but what's disputed is that there are no official records proving the funeral home workers were necrophiles, and the Snedekers hired a horror writer to write a book about this story, but the writer later mentioned that they couldn't keep the story straight, and the Warrens told me to just make it scary. And the Catholic Church never officially recognized the exorcism, and skeptics believe Philip's schizophrenia may have contributed to their family's fear. So, I don't know, is it true or not? I know there is I think 1 or 2 movie adaptations. I remember watching one, I was a bit creeped out. So, I don't think it's not the Conjuring series or anything. I think it's an older movie. Yeah. So yeah, this case wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed the 5 cases with me. It's weird how horror ASMR is scary, but it can also be very relaxing, at least for me. So yeah, thank you for watching till here. If you like my video, leave me a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoy my video. And till I see you in my next video, take care. Hasta luego. Bye.